Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so think about the device you're literally holding right now. It kind of feels like magic, doesn't it? But to get to this incredibly seamless experience, we have to trace a pretty wild journey. We're going to look at exactly how the internet evolved from this massive room-sized military experiment into the super connected network you rely on every single day. We'll trace the incredible steps of human ingenuity that took us from clunky, giant machines to an entire digital universe fitting right in our pockets. So, how exactly did a nuclear defense project become the screen you're staring at right now? How did the fear of a Cold War nuclear attack lead to the creation of the web you use to watch your favorite content today? It honestly sounds like the plot of a sci-fi movie, but it's entirely real. Back in the mid-20th century, when Sputnik launched, it wasn't just a satellite. Oh no, it was a massive wake-up call for the United States. The U.S. Department of Defense suddenly realized that if a nuclear strike hit their traditional centralized communication grids, they'd just instantly vanish. They desperately needed a communication system that was practically indestructible. And this is really where ARPANET fundamentally changed military communication forever. Before ARPANET, sharing data was incredibly vulnerable. You literally had to mail magnetic strips through the postal system, or you relied on one massive centralized computer. If that single central hub was compromised, the whole network was paralyzed. ARPANET fixed this glaring vulnerability through a revolutionary concept called packet switching. Imagine chopping a top-secret letter into tiny puzzle pieces, sending them all down totally different roads, and having them magically reassemble perfectly at the destination. If one road, or node, gets destroyed in an attack, the network just instantly finds another route. It was an absolute game-changer for secure, resilient military communication. So, after setting up these decentralized nodes, it was finally time for a real-world test. October 29, 1969, the very first ARPANET message was sent between two computers, one at a UCLA research lab and the other at Stanford. The message was just supposed to be the word login. Pretty simple, right? Well, hilariously, the network completely crashed after they typed just the first two letters. They sent an L and an O and literally broke the system. But hey, every grand technological revolution has to start somewhere, for sure. This whole idea of computers actually talking to each other started as a highly theoretical intergalactic network. It was drummed up in the 1960s by MIT scientist J.C.R. Licklider. And that theoretical seed sprouted into the 1969 ARPANET milestone we just talked about. As the network slowly expanded in the early 70s to include places like the University of Hawaii, London, and Norway, people realized they needed a way to talk to each other, not just share raw, boring data. Enter programmer Ray Tomlinson in 1971. He developed the first system to send electronic mail back and forth, officially inventing email. And yeah, he's also the genius who gave us the iconic @ symbol to separate a person's name from their host network. But as more and more of these separate networks started floating around globally, we ran into a massive problem. They didn't speak the same language. It was total chaos. Computer scientists Vince Cerf and Robert Kahn stepped in and figured out a way to introduce these global computers to each other in a shared virtual space. They created the Transmission Control Protocol, or TCP, followed by the Internet Protocol, or IP. This finally established the universal rules of communication. When ARPANET officially adopted TCP on January 1st, 1983, it was a monumental shift. Actually, this exact date, January 1st, 1983, is widely considered the official birthday of the modern internet. But hold on a second. Even with TCP/IP, the internet in the 1980s was basically just a dry data sharing space for scientists and the military. You needed highly advanced computer skills just to access the thing. Think of the internet at that point as the physical roads and bridges. But a brilliant British computer scientist named Tim Berners-Lee, he invented the World Wide Web in 1989. The web was the actual shops and houses built on top of those roads, making it a place anyone could actually visit. 2 years later, on August 6, 1991, he launched the very first website in human history over at the CERN Research Center. To make this brand new World Wide Web actually usable for the general public, it desperately needed a visual interface. Nobody wanted to stare at lines of code. So, in 1992, Urwise became the first browser with a graphical layout. But it was Mosaic in 1993 that truly popularized surfing the web, mostly because of its incredibly user-friendly design. And that directly inspired the launch of Netscape Navigator in 1994, which quickly gobbled up like 90% of all web usage. Suddenly, you didn't need a PhD or a government clearance to navigate the digital world. For those who remember it, the iconic, screeching sound of companies like AOL and CompuServe connecting you via dial-up is just permanently burned into our brains. Your telephone line was plugged right into your computer, meaning you literally couldn't use your house phone and the internet at the same time. If someone called you, boom, you got kicked offline. And hilariously enough, paving the way for today's massive e-commerce empire, the very first thing ever purchased online was a pizza. Seriously, a pizza. Once the public got their hands on this tech, the growth was absolutely explosive. I mean, we rocketed from a tiny handful of just 10 global websites in 1992 to nearly 3,000 in 1994. And then, zooming past 100,000 websites by 1996, the floodgates of information were officially wide open, and the world was never going to be the same. But, like any new frontier, this led to a massive Wild West-style gold rush. Welcome to the dot-com bubble. Rapid technological progress championed by titans like Apple, Microsoft, and Yahoo created an absolute frenzy. Investors were basically throwing money at literally any company with a .com in its name. This sent economic values into the stratosphere between 1997 and 2000. But as with all speculative frenzies, reality eventually caught up. The bubble spectacularly burst, wiping out countless tech startups practically overnight. But out of the ashes of that huge crash emerged something even more powerful. Web 2.0. See, up until now, Web 1.0 was basically a read-only digital library. You went online, you read a static page, and you logged off. That was it. Web 2.0 changed the entire paradigm by making it a two-way street. The emphasis completely shifted to social networks, cloud computing, and most importantly, user-generated content. The internet became a place where you didn't just consume information anymore, you actively created it. And that shift, that sparked the social revolution. It is genuinely amazing how fast this all happened. In 2004, the Facebook was born on a college campus, fundamentally changing how we maintain relationships. A year later, in 2005, YouTube launched and became the ultimate search engine for video content. Platforms like Twitter and Instagram quickly followed suit. These platforms turned every single one of us from passive readers into active creators. Suddenly, sharing our lives, our ideas, and our funny moments with the entire globe was just a click away. It democratized media in a way humanity had literally never seen before. Thanks to smartphones putting the raw power of a desktop computer right into our pockets, internet adoption just skyrocketed. We went from roughly 1 billion global users in 2005 to over 5.3 billion recently. That is over 66% of the world's total population, all connected to this single, unified, invisible web of information. To put that into perspective, that's a level of global connection humanity hasn't experienced in its entire history. So what does this all mean? Where are we heading next? Well, today, we're standing right on the threshold of a totally new era known as Web 3.0. And in a really fascinating twist of fate, Web 3.0 is actually a return to the internet's very first concept, decentralization. Just like the military wanted to avoid a single point of failure with ARPANET, Web 3.0 uses blockchain technology, so we don't have to rely on a few massive corporate gatekeepers. The primary goal here is to give users ultimate control over their own data, their privacy, and their online creations. It's really all about putting the power of the web back into the hands of the individual. And you've probably noticed the web is no longer confined to just our screens. With the Internet of Things, we've gone from a secure Cold War defense network to, well, a smart refrigerator that literally senses when you're out of eggs and orders them for you. Our physical devices sync effortlessly with our smartphones to organize our entire lives. Plus, companies are actively building out immersive 3D digital worlds where we can work, shop, and socialize as if we're physically in the same room. So, when you consider that we went from crashing a giant room-sized computer with the letters L and O to instantly accessing the sum of all human knowledge from basically anywhere on Earth, what do you think the internet will look like in another 50 years? Will screens even exist, or will the web just be directly integrated into our daily physical reality? It's pretty wild to think about. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.